us sit here today and can think back to a time in our lives when we thought, oh, poor me, or gosh, my life sucks. I personally can definitely think back to a time in my life where I thought these exact things. I was young when I thought it, but nevertheless, I've thought in this, and I've probably said it in the last week a couple times. What I want us to look at, though, is, does our life really suck? Is it really that bad? I've been through a few life experiences, going to other countries, third world countries at that. I've had people live in my house that are from third world countries. My aunt is actually from the Philippines. And I've also lived in a town my entire life until I went to college that is overly full of poor people and poverty. And it honestly just shocks me at how many people look at their lives and think they're terrible, including myself, and really, they're not that bad. I thought I was poor when I was younger because my family went from a dual income family to a single income family. How dare them? How dare I have two parents, nonetheless? My mom went back to school to get her bachelor's and her master's degree to be a teacher, and so therefore my dad was the only one working. He was a mechanic at a local car shop and did odd-end jobs at home. So of course the little girl, I'm about 5 or 6 at the time, I'm out in the garage my entire childhood helping my dad work on cars. Again, I'm 5 or 6 and I'm a girl. I highly doubt I was really helping that much. I was probably making things harder and making people pay more because the time took longer. But that's okay. I can now change my own oil and do a lot of other things, so I guess I learned something. I look at this though, and now I look back and think, shame on me. How dare I think that my family was poor because I had to eat Malto-Meal cereal instead of Kellogg's. Or I had to wear clothes from Target instead of American Eagle. When really, until I was a sophomore in high school, I couldn't even fit in a size 0, so I couldn't get out into American Eagle anyways. But I look and think, why did I think these things? And why didn't I look around me? I grew up in this town that had nothing. Houses are barely put together. People at the school, according to our principal, Gary Stamper, there's over 60% of our school on free and reduced lunches. And this is an entire grade school and a high school, but nonetheless, if that doesn't show you how poor of a place I live in, then maybe the idea that I had a friend growing up in school that always came to my house, or we always went to our friend's house for sleepovers, but we never went to her house. Never. And I always wondered why. I guess she had a brother and a sister, and her mom was single. They lived with her grandma. And that didn't bother us, so why couldn't we go to her house? I didn't learn until high school that she lived in a mobile home that didn't have a roof. It was a tarp, a blue tarp. And she was ashamed of this. Her parents her mom could afford a new tarp every month maybe. Sometimes the holy one that they had was all they could afford. And I look back now and think, I never knew this about her. I sat there and how many times in front of her did something little happen and I was like, oh, my life sucks. When really hers was so much worse off than mine. I had a 3-story house, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, food in front of my face, a roof over my head, and I was getting an education when so many people weren't. And this was something that I think many of us don't think about. Not only have I grown up in this, in 2007 we had a flood just sweep through our town. Much like a broom sweeping the dust off your front porch, everything was gone. Houses, clothes, food, everything. I joined FEMA because my house wasn't affected in this flood, and I wanted to help people get their feet back up. But what I came to found is people are poor and they don't actually have house insurance. So they didn't have the money to rebuild their houses. And even if you did have home insurance, insurance where I live doesn't cover floods because they don't think we live in a flood area. Yet every year, somebody's house floods where I live. My house flooded in 2009, and it was expensive to fix, and there was no insurance for those costs, because they just didn't cover it, even if we had insurance. I looked at these people, and not only did they not have the necessities of food and water, they didn't have a house, and they didn't have the money to rebuild a house. They were on the streets, and that was it. So living through these and seeing these things around me, I came to be thankful for what I did have. I had parents that loved me. I had a school. I had food. I had a roof. And I was thankful for those things. But what made me further be thankful for these things, and I think something that we should all think about, is when I went on my trip I went on a cruise for graduation. My parents took me on one. And it was amazing. I was so excited. Yay, I graduated high school. Congratulations, Molly. My parents took me to the Western Caribbean. coolest thing ever. We fly to Florida, I'm so excited, we get on the cruise. Actually almost ran over a little boat on our way out of the port. That wasn't good. I think my cruise would have been over at that point. We start to take off, and all I can think about is me and my two friends, my parents, just enjoying the sun and seeing new places. But nothing in my entire life could prepare me for what I was about to see. My first stop was in Jamaica, and though this is a beautiful place, as we came into the port, we were surrounded by police boats. As we came to the port and got off the ship to go through the pass gates, we were surrounded by policemen until we got out of the gates. I later found out that this was because people from Jamaica will sit in the water and then try to climb onto the ship just to get back to America. As we go through the pass gates, though, I can see these little dirty fingers squeezing so small through the fence holes just to ask for spare change. I'm an 18-year-old with my parents. First of all, I didn't carry my money. My dad did because he didn't want anybody to rob me. He didn't trust me, apparently. And second of all, we didn't really carry change for that exact reason. People would just try to pickpocket you here because they didn't have money. So I just wanted to help these people, but I knew that I couldn't. This continued on as we went out and we kept going. I got to climb Dunn's River Falls, which was amazing, and it was beautiful, and I couldn't imagine doing it again. It was a lot of work, but it was so much fun. And they actually have photographers that will climb with you and take pictures of you and whoever you're with so you can get done and buy pictures. This guy's name was Renard. He was 22 years old at the time, and we have since been friends on Facebook. Gotta keep in touch. But this day, he was taking a picture of me and my two friends, and he walks up to us to show us the picture, and he says, "I have a question for you three." And we were like, "Okay, what's that?" He says, "Will one of you marry me and take me to America with you?" Not only did this question stop me in my tracks, I wanted to shed a tear but laugh at the same time at the fact that, one, did he think I was that crazy? Or two, did he really think that would work? I never really knew, but we continued to stay friends, and I later found out that he lived with his siblings, his mom, his dad was gone, his aunt, his uncle, and their children, and his grandma in a one-bedroom apartment. When he found out that I lived in a 3-story house where we each had our own bedrooms, and it was just me, my two brothers, and my parents, he was shocked. And I couldn't believe that somebody with that many people could live in a single-bedroom apartment. This was something that made me extremely thankful for my home, and for the life my parents had provided for me, and the life that God had blessed me with. We continued on to the Grand Caymans, which, when you go to the Grand Caymans on a ship, they usually take you to the nice part of town. So obviously it's not as nice as you might see things here, but it wasn't heart-wrenching as Jamaica and Honduras was. So my last stop was Honduras, and as many of you know, it's a fairly poor country. According to the Rural Poverty portal, it is the second poorest country in Central America. And this was evident by what I saw. I thought that nothing could prepare me for Jamaica, but when I came to Honduras, I was shocked even more. I thought, oh, I've already seen Jamaica, what else can happen? There was 3 times the amount of police boats leading us into here for the same reason. We couldn't even get out of the pass gates without taking a bus. We got sent right on each of our buses to go to our different destinations, and that was instantly happened. We didn't even walk out of the gates. We were going snorkeling, and of course I'm excited. I'm ready to see all these pretty fish, and I'm on the bus just looking out the window. I quickly went from excited to sad. Looking around, nothing was hidden. In Jamaica, they would try to hide things from the people that were coming to see stuff, but in Honduras, they hid nothing. There was houses with no windows, no doors, and no walls. I didn't know how these people lived. It was raining when we first got there, though it quickly stopped and the sun came out, much like Ellensburg. I didn't know how they lived in this. Some of the houses had pieces of their house falling into the ocean because they were right along the coast. There was dogs running around, so skinny that their bones were sticking out, because families often didn't have enough money to feed themselves, let alone an animal. I couldn't imagine living like this, and I didn't even know what to think or do. I can remember looking at my mom and just being speechless and just asking her, how do these people live? And she reminded me that that's why we must be thankful for where we live and what we have. I got to my snorkeling location, and of course, I couldn't really be as happy as I wanted to be, because I was sitting there relaxing in the water, getting a tan, looking at pretty fish, when if any of those people had to go out and do that, it was for their dinner that night. And it was probably illegal for them to do it without some kind of pass, much like us. So we get done snorkeling, and we come back, and they drop us off. And there's like their mall, which is actually sticks with tarps over the top and people selling homemade goods underneath of them. But that was what we were going to go get our souvenirs out of. And it was close to the pass gate, so we wouldn't be late. And you could see it within the distance, just a little ways away, and we were going to walk there. But this little boy, who couldn't have been more than 6, walks up, just gotten out of school, he still had his backpack and his little uniform on, comes up and says, "Can I help you guys?" And of course we can see it, but we're like, "No, why don't you show us the shopping area?" So this little boy walks us. He walked through the entire thing with us and helped us bargain and barter and buy everything that we got. I don't think we paid full price for one thing there because of this little boy. Nor could I speak half the things that he said to these people. I don't know what he said. We got back, though. He walks us all the way to the pass gate, looks at my dad, and he says, "Thank you." I couldn't help but think, why is he thanking us? My dad turns to this little boy and says, "No, thank you," and hands him a $50 bill. This boy's face lit up. I had never seen somebody so excited over money in my entire life. With a tear rolling down his face, he looks at my dad and says, "You have no idea how long this will feed my family." This boy was 6, and he was out working for his parents to get money, to feed his family. I was shocked at this, yet at the same time so happy that we could help this little boy feed his family for an unknown amount of time. I didn't care if it was for a day. I was happy for this little boy. I think this really showed that you need to look at your life and realize that the $50 your family might spend on a steak and potato dinner one night, because my family eats a lot, we spend that much on one night's dinner, might feed somebody else's family for weeks. Not only this, I had an at-home experience with my aunt being from the Philippines. My uncle was in the Navy, shipped out, met this lady in the Philippines, brings her back one day, and not but a month later gets shipped out again. So she comes to live with my family. Why they chose us, I am really still unsure of. She comes to live with us, being from the Philippines, and I was only 3 at the time, but my mom likes to remind me that I thought she was the coolest person ever. I didn't have a sister, and she was short and little, so it was almost like she was my own little sister. I don't know. I only had an older brother that beat me up, and I guess she protected me, but I wanted to be just like her. My mom says this story laughing, and some of you might laugh at it too, but she walks up the stairs one day, and our bathroom's on the left side of the house, looks over, and all she sees is me crouched, standing over a toilet with my feet on the toilet. And I'm like crouched over. And quickly my mom says, "Molly, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Mom, I'm peeing like Aunt Diane." And she simply just fixes what I'm doing because she knows it's not right. And I later learned that this was because my aunt came from a very rural place in the Philippines. According to Equity and Poverty Reduction, the Philippines has a third of its population living in poverty, and most of it is in the rural areas. My aunt was from one of these areas. The only thing she had to pee in was a hole in the ground. I didn't know that at the time. I just thought that's how she went to the bathroom, and I thought it was cool, apparently. But I've learned that even the toilet that I get to use for the bathroom is something to be thankful for. And I think it's something that we should all be thankful for as well. So, from feeling poor to seeing poor, being a part of it and having it around me, I think I've learned a lot. I think it's something that we should all take in and realize that maybe our lives aren't so bad. I think if we all take the time to be a little bit more thankful, then maybe we can help someone else. Because we have food on our table, a roof over our head, we have an education. And this is something most people don't get the chance to have. Maybe we need to finally realize that we need to stop and smell the roses, or that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. These are things we often hear, but do we really ever think about them? I think it's time for us to all stop for just 1 minute at some point in your day and thank God, or whatever it is that you believe in, for the life you've been blessed with. Because many people will never know the things that we have. Thank you.
Any questions? You said something about FEMA when the flood came through your town. Did you actually join FEMA, or how did
When they came through the town, they needed lots of volunteers, and since pretty much everybody was affected, my whole family was a part of it. We had to go get water from out town, and a big thing.
Where do you live?
I live in a town called Glenoma. It's just on the other side of White Pass. Very tiny. Very, very tiny.
Anybody else?
Would getting involved in third world countries be something you'd be interested in?
Honestly, yes. I think mostly I want to help with children. I'm a child person. And I like helping little kids. And seeing that little boy's face it was 4 years ago, and I can remember exactly what it was like seeing that little boy's face.